Hello and welcome back to the Dark Duo. I am Kosette.
And my name is Ty.
All right, thanks so much for listening and all the support. We're glad to have you back for another episode. Don't forget to follow the Instagram at the Dark Duo _podcast for case visuals. If you do not look at Instagram or you don't have Instagram, then you probably haven't seen the theme of the month yet. For the month of April, our theme is going to be mysterious disappearances. I'm super excited for this theme and I am ready to jump in. Ty, is there anything from your week you want to share or anything you want to talk about before we begin?
This week was pretty eventful. I got a new job. I started my new job. I mean, I've had it for a while now, but this last week I started. So that was pretty exciting. Another thing is I'm just excited for a new theme of the podcast. It's going to be good.
All right, so here is our sources for the week. lightsonpod.medium.com, ladbible.com, medium.com, marshallindependent.com, mlman.net, grandforksherald.com, lostsoulsofamerica.wordpress.com.
Perfect.
All right, Ty, I want you to imagine this scene, and I know you're not a father, but maybe imagine it's your brother. Your brother calls you. It's just before 2 a.m., so it's pretty early morning. They say, I drove my car into a ditch. I can't get it out. The tires are stuck. I can't get any traction. Can you come help me?
Okay.
I feel like you'd probably hustle your way to go help them.
Oh, absolutely.
You ask the location and you hop in your car, but something's odd when you arrive at that location they gave you. The car's not in sight, and neither is your brother.
Like the description that they gave me?
Yeah.
Or where they told me they were?
So
okay.
like, let's say they said, I'm off Highway 38. I don't know if
Okay.
that's a real highway, but say it is. They're
It
like,
probably is.
It probably is. They're like, I'm off Highway 38. I'm on the back road of some red road. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
You get to that road, they're not there.
Okay.
Their car's not there. Nothing's there.
Yeah, that's weird.
Okay. Confused, you call them again, and you're like, I don't really see you. I don't see any lights. And they're like, no, like, I can see the lights of the town. Like, I'm right here. You have them describe their location, and it looks the exact same as what you're looking at.
Okay.
They tell you, okay, I don't really want to wait. I'm just going to walk into town. I'll meet you there. You're trying to gather information of where they are, and suddenly the call drops. You try to call back several times, and they don't pick up. You never see them again, and you never talk to them again.
That sounds terrible. I don't like this already.
A little ominous, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd do anything for my brothers.
Oh, I know you would.
Like 100%, absolutely. I would do anything for them. And I would find them. I mean, I have their location, so.
It's true. That's
They wouldn't need to give me like a description of where they're at because I have their exact location 24/7.
That's true. This was before the time of Find My iPhone, though.
I know.
Okay. But we did have phones.
Yeah.
So the true crime case that we're going to cover today is my Roman Empire of true crime cases. I think everyone has that one case that just kind of sticks to them and they think about a lot. I mean, I know you're still newer to true crime, but is there like any you can think of that like is yours?
No.
Okay.
No, there's not a specific case that's sticking out to me right now. Maybe Ted Bundy. He's interesting.
Okay.
He's an interesting guy.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of people's Roman Empire.
Probably
but-
true. Well, this one's mine. I think about this case so much just because there's so many things that don't add up. It's so mysterious and you're about to see why I think that this is mine. And maybe this case will become your true crime Roman Empire.
We'll see.
Brandon Swanson was born January 30th, 1989 in Marshall, Minnesota. His parents were Brian and Annette Swanson, and he had 4 siblings. He was the oldest of the family, and growing up, Brandon was known to be funny and smart. He loved to read and he excelled in his academics. He was close to his family and was the good older brother who watched out for his younger siblings. Brandon graduated from Marshall High School in 2007. He was excited to be able to spread his wings and pursue his academics and continue to excel. He decided to attend Minnesota West Community and Technical College, which was in Canby, Minnesota. He chose to study wind turbines that first year and was in the wind turbine program. He had then planned to transfer that fall to the Iowa Community College and major in science the coming year as he was finishing up his wind turbine program.
Yeah.
The classes at Minnesota West ended on May 13th. Brandon had made it through his finals week and of course stayed the night to celebrate with friends. He had attended 2 different parties that night. Friends who had seen him said yes, he did consume some alcohol, but it wasn't enough that it would make him visibly intoxicated, and he didn't appear to be drunk. He had attended the first party for a while, and then he attended the second party. The second party was at a friend's house in Canby, so where he was attending school. He leaves the party around 12 or 12:30, as what the friends are all saying, and he lived at home, so he then leaves to drive home. He wasn't super far, it was roughly a 45-minute drive, and he knew the route very well. He always used the same route to commute to and from college, so I'm sure it was probably familiar. The only difference is he usually takes Minnesota State Highway 68, but instead he decides to take back roads that go through the rural farming area. He sets off, but he doesn't make it home. Nearly 2 hours after he left, he calls his parents at roughly 1:54 and tells them I got stuck in a ditch and I drove off the road. The car wheels are elevated, so I couldn't get any traction to get out of the ditch. They ask where he's at, and he says he's on the back road that runs north of Highway 68. They ask if he's injured or if anything happened, and he assured them he's not injured. He just needs some help to get the car unstuck so he can drive the rest of the way back home. They're a little confused, though, as to why he decided to turn off Highway 68 and take the dirt roads home. When he didn't have to do that, he could take the highway pretty much all the way home. But they didn't really ask questions. His dad tells him, I know exactly where you are. It's a 10-minute drive. We'll be there pretty quick.
Okay.
Annette and Brian then get in their truck and drive to the location Brandon had given them. During their drive, they keep Brandon on the phone call with them. They arrive at the location Brandon described to them and had told them where he was, but they don't see him or his car. Brian tells Brandon he'll flash his lights on his pickup and tells Brandon that he should do so as well on his car so they can figure out where he is. They assume that he probably just couldn't see it because the car was down in the ditch, so probably out of sight. So they thought that this might be able to help him to figure out how and where the car was and where it was off the road at. If it was lower in the ditch, they'd be able to see the lights from the road. However, neither of them could see the other flashing lights. Brandon couldn't see his parents flashing theirs, and the parents didn't see any sign of the car off the road. His dad is like, all right, let's try honking our horns. Maybe we can get like the general area you're in. And they hear him honk the horn through the phone, but nothing like locally, which is odd, right?
What the heck? So like they had to be close enough for the phone to pick up the horn, right?
Yes. So like Brandon was by his car, so they could hear him honk his horn through the phone call, but not outside where they are, if that makes sense.
Okay, so Brian was honking his horn. Brandon, his father, wasn't honking the horn.
Brandon is the son. Brian is the father.
Okay.
So Brandon is honking his horn. He's the one that went off into the ditch.
Yeah.
He's honking his horn. Brian, the dad, hears it through the phone call.
Okay. But
doesn't hear it around him.
I thought it was more like the dad was honking his horn.
No.
Okay.
No. The dad tells Brandon to honk his horn.
Okay.
So they can see if they can like hear like general area of where he's at or how far it seems he is away.
Yeah.
But they don't hear anything.
Okay.
But they hear it through the phone call.
I wasn't paying attention. I thought it was more like the dad told his son to honk the horn. Or the dad honked his horn and he heard his own horn through the son's phone. So that means they were close.
No.
Okay.
No. They tell him to describe his surroundings, which are the exact same as their surroundings.
But it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's 2 a.m.
What are you going to see in your surroundings at 2 a.m? It's dark.
Like, I see a dark field.
I see the moon.
Yeah, I see the moon. So Brandon's annoyed, and with his parents, he's like, I literally told them where I'm at. They drove to the wrong place. They're not where I told them to go. I specifically told them where to go. But they're frustrated because they're in the exact place that Brandon told them to go. He told them that where he was, and they went to that same place, but he's not there. So this created an argument to ensue, and I mean, it's also early hours. It's like 2 a.m. I'm sure everyone's exhausted. And they're frustrated. They got woke up. They're saying he's in a spot. He's not there. But he's frustrated because he told them where to go. They're not there.
Yeah.
So this fight ensues, and Brandon hangs up the phone. Annette, the mother, then calls him back to apologize. Brandon at this point was super impatient that they couldn't find the right spot because he'd given the directions clear as day, and he didn't want to wait anymore. So he says, up the road, I can see the lights of the city of Lind. I'm just going to walk to Lind. I'll wait at the diner, maybe a bar. Just pick me up there. I don't want to wait anymore, so just pick me up in Lind. They agree that sounds good. So they had decided to drive the one daughter home quickly because she was in the back seat with them. And they decide they'll go pick up Brandon at the bar or wherever he ends up in Lind. They'll call him. So Brian calls him once again when he's on his way to get him, which is at 2:23 a.m. and remains on the call with him since he's walking back to town. They're talking and Brandon's describing the surroundings to his father. He tells his father he's walking along a fence line. He sees the lights of Lind in the distance. He says he's going to cut across the field so he can get there quicker. Which his dad's a little bothered just because it's dark. He's going to cut through fields instead of sticking to a main road. Brian then continues talking as he drives up and down the road to try and find Brandon. Brandon is describing the fences and here's like the sound of like running water through the phone, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So then at 3:10, Brandon suddenly shouts, "Oh, shiz." But he doesn't say shiz. He says a word that starts with S, ends in T, rhymes with spit.
Yeah.
Sure, you can figure out what it is.
I know what you're getting at. I know that word very well.
So as soon as the words leave his mouth, the call abruptly ends. Brian tries to call Brandon back, but he doesn't pick up ever again, and it keeps going to voicemail. The phone is ringing, but it's like ringing through to voicemail. So it's not going straight to voicemail, but it's still ringing through to voicemail. Okay. Just like he's not picking up. So those are the last words that he would ever speak, and his father would hear from him. After this, his parents and friends all searched for him the rest of the night along the gravel roads and the farm areas of Lind. While doing this, they continued to try to call him so that they could locate him, but no such luck. I can't also imagine the fear of his parents just because they can't reach him. It's 3 a.m. It's dark outside. You hear him say something you'd say probably from either like shock, fear, maybe he got hurt, and now they're not answering. And to me, that just seems super ominous.
Yeah.
So the next morning at 6:30, Annette, his mother, went to the Lind Police Department so that she could report him missing. What do you think the police said, Ty?
Let me guess. He hasn't been missing for 24 hours, so they can't file a missing person report.
Kind of close. The police told him it's a teenage college kid disappearing in the middle of the night. This is totally normal, especially after the semester ends. One police officer even stated it's his right to be missing. He's a grown adult.
What the heck?
Which I'm sure was so frustrating for his parents.
Yeah, do you know if... I bet like the parents told the entire like scenario to the police officers before.
Yes, they did.
They went to go file that missing person report.
They said we were on the phone. He went off the ditch. We can't find him. He's missing. He dropped a phone call. They're like, well, it's his right to be missing. So the parents led up the searches without police assistance because they're going to find their kid. And they got his friends to join them and anyone that would join the searches. However, later in the morning, the police decided to join the search after they realized how serious this case was. And it wasn't just a teenage college boy who had stayed out for too late. After they joined the search area, they were unable to find Brandon or the car that Brandon had supposedly drove into the ditch. Police then realized that Brandon's phone was still working. As I said earlier, it was still ringing through. So they decided that they would use the signals from the phone to see which tower it's pinging from. Which, if you don't know how this works, I'll explain it. So when your phone makes a call or sends a text, there's like towers in an area that give your phone service to do this. Depending where you are in an area, your phone will ping from different towers. So it will go to the closest tower to ping off of to send you service, to send your calls, send your texts.
Yeah, there's like a certain radius that the tower can serve, like in that area, give service to. So
this is what the police are going to check. They're going to see if they can figure out which tower he's pinging from.
Yeah, that way they know like a general search area where to go.
Yes, because a tower can only reach so many square footage, so we can search that footage.
Go and try and find him in that area.
So they learned that his phone isn't actually pinging off of a tower in Lind, but rather 20 miles away in a town called Porter, which is a neighboring town to Canby.
That's 20 miles. That's quite a ways.
Big difference, right?
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of locations that I keep naming, but we'll post on the Instagram like a map of this area so you don't get confused. So the reason that they couldn't find Brandon was because they weren't even in the right area. This means that when Brandon initially drove into the ditch, he had told his parents the wrong location, which is also odd because he always took the same way home, and Porter was a neighboring city to Canby, as I said earlier. This means it took him 2 hours to get from Canby to Porter, when Porter's the next town over.
That's interesting.
Yeah?
That's very interesting.
Which is confusing. How did it take him 2 hours to get from to a neighboring town?
I don't know.
But that's the $1 million question, is how did he end up in Porter, not Lind? I mean, this to me, I went to school at Utah State University, and my parents' house was roughly 30 minutes from campus. So I know, I knew that drive like the back of my hand, and I could do it probably with my eyes closed because I did it so often, which same as he was doing. He was living at home, so his 30-minute to 45-minute commute probably did it multiple times a day.
Yeah, but you driving with your eyes closed, that's terrifying.
I wouldn't do that. But that's why for me it's confusing, because let's say for Logan, Utah, this would be Hyde Park, would be a neighboring town, but it wouldn't take me 20 minutes to get there. It takes maybe 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and it's all back roads, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still weird, right? So it just seems confusing how he ended up in Porter instead of Lind.
Yeah.
So the police are now searching in Porter, which is the actual right area, because they got the phone to ping and they find the car in this area. So Brandon's green Chevy Lumina sedan is stuck in a ditch just off of the Lyon-Lincoln Road, which is between Porter and Taunton. They search the surrounding areas and they don't see any signs of foul play. They do find something odd in the car, though. Can you guess what it is, Ty?
Something odd in the car?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. What would it be?
His glasses. Which is weird. Here's why it's weird, though. So Brandon's actually legally blind in his left eye due to an injury from when he was a child. So in order to see, Brandon needs his glasses.
Yeah.
This would be like my brother trying to drive home without his glasses.
Oh, yeah, that's bad.
Like, that's scary.
Because he is legally blind.
He's legally blind. So, like, think about that. Like, that's weird that his glasses were just stuck. And not even just driving home, but also him getting out and going to walk.
And explaining, like, all of the scenery and the fences and
without
walking
glasses
through.
on.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Especially at night.
Especially at night. I know if my brother didn't have his glasses on, he'd be like, I see a black blur. Like, that's it. So it seems weird. But we know from his parents that he was walking near a town. So why did he walk near a town without his glasses, as we said? $1 million question again. So they did not find keys in the car. And they did not find any alcohol, any illegal drugs in the vehicle. They also found no signs of blood, no evidence of a struggle. And they were unable to find footprints to track which way he left on foot. They also took samples of DNA evidence to see if anyone else was in the car, and it came up empty as well.
That's weird.
So I think the first question we come to is, how did he get so confused to where he was? He's nowhere near Lind, so why was he so convinced he was? I've heard some people say it's most likely could have been an alternate reality, some supernatural time loop, or maybe it was a glitch in the Matrix, if you believe those things.
That's interesting.
If you don't believe in those things, I'll give you some actual somewhat of fact that we have.
Living in a simulation.
Simulation, yeah.
Yep.
So we know Brandon was legally blind in one eye, but he had a license. So obviously it wasn't bad enough he couldn't drive. But maybe this made his depth perception off at night, and that could have explained how he ended up in the wrong area and maybe drifted off the road. Another reason could have been that his friends lied about him not being intoxicated. There was also a possibility he was high. I saw in a source that he could have possibly smoked weed. Not sure of the credibility, as it was only one source, but still just a thought that I had read. But if he was drinking and high, then this could make sense how he got so confused, and would make sense why he only took back roads. He's probably trying to avoid police and not get caught. But it does seem odd enough that even after all these years, the friends still wouldn't fess up and be like, so we actually were drunk and he actually had smoked some weed. Like, if he'd been missing for this long, why wouldn't they just like come out and tell it?
Yeah, just come out clean, tell the truth.
Exactly. So that still seems weird. I don't know. But that's the only possible theories I have as to how he got confused. Is there one that you think it was, or do you think it was something else?
No, I think it was like being intoxicated. I think that was the reasoning. He was confused and didn't know where he was.
Yeah, he just gotten turned around.
And like your little theory of like that's why he wanted to take back roads makes sense, because he didn't want to get caught with a DUI or...
Yeah. Even if he was only slightly drunk, he still probably didn't want to get caught. So the police decided to involve some police dogs and see if they could catch a scent. The police also did air surveillance and got hundreds of volunteers to help the search area. 3 miles away from the car, the K9 unit led police to the Yellow Medicine River, which was at its high point and running quickly at the time. The dogs continued to the water's edge and lost the scent.
Which, when he was on the phone with his parents...
They could hear running water.
Oh, shiz.
Yes.
And the call dropped.
So they continued searching the banks of this river for roughly 6 hours of walking distance, or for roughly 2 miles each way. So, however, there's still no sign of Brandon or any belongings. The river is knee-deep in some areas, but other areas can be up to 15 feet deep. The authorities theorize that he fell into the river, which is why they focused their search in this area and the surrounding areas of the river. They even did excavation efforts in the area where the dogs had led them, but had no luck of finding anything. They were able to rule out this river, though, because if he did fall in the body of water, he probably would have been pushed downriver and would have surfaced, and his body would have been found. In the early weeks of the search, so May and June of 2008, the land and air searches were conducted by community volunteers and from professional search organizations. But they also had no luck finding Brandon. Most of the other searches had focused on the specific area of Mud Creek because of the bloodhounds leading them there. Then in August 7th through 8th of 2010, they also did another major search, where they got cadaver dogs to indicate a scent, which was evidence enough to keep the searches alive. Jeff Hasse and Ken Anderson are the co-search managers over Brandon Swanson, and they've led this case for the last 17 years. They've also continued to lead search efforts, and Anderson has stated that there are many variables that have complicated this search. He said that with the Minnesota environments, the wind patterns are always changing, and the Buffalo Ridge area also has like wind swirling. So the winds are crazy. So you could go for lunch and the winds will be going north. You could come back from lunch break and the winds are now going east. So Anderson stated that with their working dogs, they had to work in the winds that were over 8 miles an hour, and most scent dogs only work in winds under 8 miles.
Yeah.
So they were having some difficult conditions to find scents, but they're still finding them.
Yeah.
So another scent issue is the area is full of farm fields that are moist in the middle of the field. So your water's in that middle of the field and it can end up in a ditch and a mile away when it's either runoff or irrigated or whatever. So how do the dogs connect this scent to the water environment when it's miles away? So science is really complicated when it comes to scent, and there's not been a ton of data on how like your scent moves. So the federal government has had some software that shows how things move by air, which are then deposited, picked up back by your air again, moved again. But it's actually not your scent moving, but it's rather chemical or biological materials. Which, for those that don't know this, scent dogs aren't actually picking up a person's actual scent, but they're rather picking up the smell of a person's dead skin cells that have flaked off. Humans lose millions of skin cells a day, so when a dog is sniffing a so-called scent, it's actually the dead skin cells that have the person's particular DNA that they are picking up. So when these skin cells are showed as a biological material, it's then getting picked up, moved, and changed from all the winds and rains, other environmental factors that come into play. So if you have 3 days of winds that are picked up in the same direction, your smell would be technically in a straight line. But if your wind is changing, let's say 45 degrees a day for 3 days, you suddenly have a zigzag line that goes 3 ways in 45-degree increments.
Yeah.
So the reason they've also changed the different kind of canine teams they've used is to try to pick up these changes, just because it's so complicated and the environment is so harsh out there. So they've gotten ones that are more specialized canine units, just as they would if you were seeking like specially for like medical treatment, right? So in October of 2015, the search had multiple canine dogs that found a bone in a field. They collected this bone and they tested it. The results came back non-human.
So an alien.
So an alien. It was probably cattle. Or a cow.
It was probably an animal bone.
It was probably a cow. So throughout their search for Brandon, they've completed over 1,500 track logs full of searches and all the dogs that they've used where they've picked up the scents. This means if they find the body of Brandon, then they will know every person in canine that passed through that area and be able to connect the dots of his last trek. So early searches used manpower to look for Brandon, but more recent searches have used select certified human remain detection dogs. So like cadaver dogs.
Yeah.
And they've used more than 40 dogs in this search for him. Anderson has stated that he himself have talked to over 70% of the farmers as well, because it's all of their fields that he was walking through. Anderson has also stated that the highest probability is that he's in a farmer's field. If they see something, they need to tell someone. Any signs of things he was last wearing, whether it's random bones, if they see, all of these should be red flags and they need to call the police. Anderson has said that anyone who sees anything suspicious should report to Bill Flatton. He has been the spokesperson and the one over this county. He has been in the support of keeping the search going, and without him, the sheriff's office, they wouldn't be able to keep these searches alive. They also have given them many resources and communication, and they've exceeded everyone's expectations. So good on the police, because they started out not wanting to join, but even to this day, 17 years later, they're still supporting them and funding money to keep this search alive for him. So they have had some roadblocks in this search, though. Anderson said that even though they've done extensive searches wherever they can, they've had some issues with landowners not giving them permission to their fields. In the initial investigation in the late 2008, landowners, particularly those who were cattle farmers, took issue with search canines on their property. Which sounds like a red flag to me, just because I know my dad owns hundreds of acres, and if someone went missing, I know he'd let cadaver dogs search his land. I even asked him actually, and his response was, I would let them anytime. If there was cattle, also no problem. Either way, I would let them search my land. So this opinion to me is someone who does own land, also owns cattle, and the landowners not giving them permission seems sus.
Yeah. But again, also your dad doesn't have anything to hide.
That's very true. He's very open. He doesn't have anything to hide. So maybe it's simple, they just don't want trespassing, but it could also be more sinister as well, as you pointed at.
Mm-hmm.
They're still trying to solve this issue, though, today, and they're trying to get some farmers to give them access to their fields to search. They've even tried to compromise with these people to make acceptable methods that would make it okay, but they haven't been able to come up with a compromise. This is hard because no matter how much they continue their searches, there's still holes in the land search investigation. Bill Flatton has said that most landowners will give permission as they are dedicated to the community and the Swanson family. Now I'm sure you're asking, why haven't they forced them and done like a search warrant? But with a search warrant, you have to have probable cause. This has not existed for this to be able to step in and make them search their land, though.
Yeah.
The most recent search was of the Yellow Medicine River, which we talked about. It had tons of extensive searches over the years. And in the fall of 2021, so only 3.5 years ago, the river dried up to a drought. This created it so that they could bring in excavators to come in and sift dirt. Whether that was the remains, any of his belongings, anything in the dirt. The crew went to work, but did not find any traces of Brandon and still came up empty-handed. On the police side of the investigation, Wallen in the police district has said that tips do continue to come in. Even though none of them have led to his whereabouts or his remains, they do keep this case from going cold. So this is technically not a cold case, but he's also still missing. Many of the tips they have gotten are usually leading up to his disappearance, and some have claimed that he was involved in an argument before the time he went missing. They do say that all tips are followed up, though, and no matter how many separate people have come forward, they still check all tips. However, none of the tips they have received have led to a break in the case they hoped for. Most times they receive a tip, investigate, run into a dead end. They also have said many tips are either false or the information wasn't accurate, but whatever it is, they've seemed to all run into a dead end. But they're still searching all avenues and following up on all of these tips. So Swanson was last seen wearing baggy blue jeans, a blue striped polo shirt, and a black hooded zip front sweatshirt with an emblem on the back. He was also wearing a white Minnesota Twins baseball cap and a sterling silver chain. He was also carrying his black Motorola cell phone, his wallet, car keys, and his house keys. But none of these items have been recovered. None of them have been found in fields, none were found in the river, and nothing has been found anywhere that they've searched. Which again is one of those things that sticks out to me as so odd. How has nothing been found in all these 17 years? You're telling me that they haven't found his clothes, they haven't found his phone, they didn't find the keys, they didn't find the necklace, they didn't find the cap, they didn't find a wallet, they didn't find any remains, they haven't found anything in 17 years. It just seems so weird and sticks out to me again as so odd.
Yeah. I mean, he probably had all that stuff on his personnel.
Yes.
And so,
but still, his phone, he dropped his phone in it.
That's
and
true.
His call. So how did no one find his phone? Or even his car keys? Like, let's say he tripped and fell. You'd think something would have, like, he probably would have lost his baseball cap.
yeah.
Or he would have dropped his keys out of his pocket. I don't know.
Missing with no trace of evidence.
Exactly. Brian and Annette were left in a tragedy and were able to identify the roadblocks that they ran into, such as the roadblocks of getting immediate law enforcement to be involved with his Brandon's missing person case. So they wanted to help eliminate this block from other families, so they passed a law called Brandon's Law, which is a Minnesota law that was passed in 2009. This law requires the law enforcement to immediately take a missing persons report and to begin an investigation for all situations regardless of the age the person believed to be at risk, which needs to be common knowledge for every single state. No matter a person's age, if a family member thinks they're in danger, it should be investigated, no question asked. I mean, what's the worst that happened? They find the person that day and he's alive and well. But like, if you think about what the alternative is, I don't know.
I mean, why would you have to wait 24 hours to go file the missing persons report? Like, go out, do your job, find the person.
Yeah, especially because your first 24 hours are most critical.
Absolutely.
But I think that the parents pushing for this law just shows the character of who they are. They're amazing people who care about others, and they passed a law that doesn't even help their family and doesn't even advance the search for their son, but rather something that will help future families and something they felt like hindered them and could have maybe given them a better outcome. Both parents have stated that even though it's been 17 years, the pain remains and the long for answers of his disappearance is still there. But they still turn this tragedy into something better for others to benefit others rather than themselves. Alright, so this leads us to our theories of what people think happened to Brandon. We know that nothing has been recovered except for his car. Nothing was found in the car, and all searches have come up empty-handed, and this has been 17 years ago. No body has been found, no whereabouts to show where he was at. The first theory we'll talk about is voluntary disappearance. It's possible Brandon faked this end of his call, ditched the phone, ran off under an alias, but this also seems unlikely because there's zero evidence to back up he was planning to disappear. Planning your disappearance takes time, it takes research, you have to plot a disappearance, you have to find a relocation. None of that's been found. And 17 years later, you'd think someone would have recognized him and told the police, but this hasn't happened. He would have been found by now, and if not on purpose, probably by accident. It also seems weird that he was planning to disappear. Like, why would he call his father, though, to pick him up on the phone and be talking to him as he's walking? to meet his dad. That is not something you do if you're trying to disappear. You wouldn't call someone to come pick you up.
Yeah, no.
So another theory is mental breakdown occurred, which he could have been driving and just flipped, which would explain how he also thought he was in one place and not there, especially if he had psychosis happening. This would create extreme confusion and even irritability like he had on the phone. However, this also seems unlikely because friends and family have all stated that Brandon was always high functioning. He was emotionally stable as an individual, which doesn't mean much to me. I mean, I know for myself, I feel like the only person who truly knows my mental state's probably my husband. But oftentimes, like, I might not be doing well, but your immediate family will be like, oh, they're doing amazing. But it all just comes down to, like, people who do struggle with mental illness are amazing at masking their mental illnesses. So even if he was struggling with something, he probably could have been masking it to his family. Especially when it's people close to them. They're better at masking it for those close family and friends rather than just even random strangers. So to me, the statement from his family and friends doesn't have much validity, but that's also just my personal opinion. I think it's possible he could have had a mental breakdown because we also know that lots of mental health issues occur between the ages of 14 and 24. The mental illnesses that can also have a later onset are those such as schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression. So mental breakdown, I don't think it's off the table just because of the actual statistics that you have from psychology. But the only thing that makes this theory seem unlikely is, again, nothing's been found after 17 years. If he did have a mental breakdown, someone would have found him either wandering in the road, wandering in the field, or even if he somehow, let's say he made it to a mental institute, he probably still would have been found and his whereabouts would have been known, which they aren't. Another theory is he got into an accident, such as falling into the Yellow Medicine River. This theory to me makes perfect sense. I mean, the father heard the running water, all the scent dogs have lost their scent here, and it seemed to drop off from there. However, here's where it's confusing. How do so many searches go and there's nothing to find and no body? They dug up the river and they excavated it in 2021 when it dried up, as we said earlier, and they came up with nothing. They didn't find anything he was wearing, nothing they had on him, nothing of the body, no bones, no nothing. Also, if he did happen to drown in the river again, the body would have surfaced way long ago. The body would eventually washed up on shore, but nothing has surfaced. This could be said for Mud Creek as well, which is another small body of water near where he went missing, and his scent has also been found here. But again, if he drowned, the body would have been found by now, and no such thing has happened.
Unless there's underwater currents.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that in any of the research either.
That's one of the thoughts that I've had this entire time is if the Yellow Medicine River does have underwater currents, it could have carried his body somewhere else. But then again, like, it would have came up somewhere. Yeah. And like they would have noticed that, you know, he was unalive, that he was dead. And that, so underwater currents, I think, is another possibility, especially since the river, like, it would range from like 5 feet to 15 feet deep. You don't know how strong they are and how far they carried his body.
No, that's true. I didn't think about that. And I don't think any of my research had it. So good point. So another reason it seems unlikely he drowned too is because his phone was turned on until May 16th of 2008. This means his phone was on for 2 days after his disappearance because of all the phone calls that everyone was making. And it was ringing before voicemail. If a phone turns off or gets damaged, such as being submerged in water, especially your older phones, the phone wouldn't ring. It would go straight to voicemail with either 1 ring or 0 rings. So this doesn't make sense again because his phone was ringing through it just as though he wasn't picking it up. So if he would have drowned, the phone probably wouldn't have been ringing through. Something also odd about the phone call is if he fell in the river, you'd hear him trip, him tumble, a splash of water, and then a disconnection, rather than him just swearing and then the line going dead. So that seems also weird too. Let's play devil's advocate though. Let's say he dropped the phone on land when he tripped before he slipped into the water. The phone was not recovered though from around the area. This theory just doesn't make sense either, because how would the phone be ringing without it being recovered? Another
thing I don't understand is, like, how did he just accidentally fall into the river? Like, the river was high. It was, you know, some say 15 feet deep, 5 feet deep. Like, you would have heard the water rushing. Go stand next to a river and tell me you can't hear it.
I mean, if he is drunk, though, it's possibly just tripped.
Yeah.
But let's just go off the word of his friends, he wasn't.
Yeah.
So, like, he had to have been aware enough to... He drove home, was walking by a river, let's say. He probably would have been, like, aware enough to not trip in the river.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah.
But another theory is that Brandon may have sought shelter in a farmer's outland building and died there. However, again, a farmer would have found him or his remains and reported him. We do know that the night he went missing, though, was 40 degrees Fahrenheit with some small winds, but he wouldn't have perished in just like 2 or 3 hours. Another accident theory is that he fell into a hole or a trench, which he slipped into when he was walking in the dark, and then he just didn't see it. But again, after extensive searches they could have conducted, they would have probably found any type of evidence to find him. Another theory is that he committed suicide, but again, no evidence had been found, and he couldn't have hidden in his own remains if that was the case. Suicides are usually rather found quickly or at some point, and if he would have done that, then his remains would have been found by now. He also didn't have a history of mental illness or emotional instability, and he showed no signs of depression or signs of suicidal behavior, which again we talked about doesn't credit to much. People can mask, and people can be suffering and in a dark place without people knowing that they are. But again, he also wouldn't have called his parents to pick him up if that's what he was thinking of doing. Another theory is he was murdered. No one knew of anyone that would want to hurt Brandon, but it could have been a crime of chance. It has not been ruled out that he was taken or murdered, and his remains were disposed of in a place that no one could find. The chances are slim in the way that someone could have been driving around rural Minnesota at 3 a.m., but not impossible. It could have been a crime of chance, as I said, and he could have just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This could have also corroborated why his remains are not found. They could have taken him or the body elsewhere that people aren't looking for. Another possibility along these lines is vehicular homicide. Someone could have been driving intoxicated and accidentally hit him, and he was on the gravel road. 0 streetlights, poor visibility. A driver easily probably could have hit him, ran for the fear of going to prison, or even taken the body with them, stuffed it in their car because they didn't want to be found out. But this also just doesn't sit right to me, just because we know he wasn't walking in the roads. He was in the field when he was on the phone with his dad.
Yeah, and the dogs picked up his scent all the way to the river.
Yeah, they didn't pick up a scent on the gravel road. So this doesn't sit right, but it's possible it could have been kidnapped in the middle of the field and then dragged back or taken into a car as well. But the next year I read that was Brandon got abducted by aliens. Many UFO sightings do happen in rural areas with fields, so this does seem possible. He could have been walking, seen a UFO, which would make sense why he said, "I see city lights," and the UFO could have had lights, which he then went towards. This made him the perfect target for them to capture. They took him, they ran tests on him, but they actually liked him, so they decided to keep him. This also would make sense how he got disoriented. I mean, a lot of people have claimed that they've had alien encounters or claimed that they were taken by aliens or abducted by aliens. Always will say that they had confusion and loss of memory. So this could too explain how he ended up crashed. Maybe the lights of the UFO were so bright that they caught his attention, drove off the road, then went towards the light, got captured by aliens. But again, I'm not sure of this theory too.
Yeah, those gosh dang aliens.
I know.
Yeah, what do they want with the humans? What do they want with us?
They just want to test us, you know?
For what?
I don't know.
Go back to your own world.
I'd test an alien if I could.
No.
They're cool.
What, you want E.T.?
No. I have also read a couple theories related to the farmers. The first is that a farmer saw him on his land and thought he was trespassing. So the farmer shot him and hid the body in one of his fields. This one to me seems plausible. It also would make sense why some of the farmers are being weird about not letting others search their land. Another farm one is that he fell into the river, climbed out, and passed out in a farmer's field. The farmer then found him again and didn't know what to do, so he disposed of him in his field. Another variation of the story is that he passed out, and then due to the winds, he was buried under dirt and then farm debris or crops, and he ended up getting run over by farm equipment. This one also seems plausible, just because if they did have high winds, they probably really couldn't see the body, and he easily could have been plowed over, disked over, or even planted over. This does seem a little weird though, just because even if you're in a tractor, you probably would have felt a body, but then again, maybe they accidentally ran him over, freaked out, buried him in the middle of the field, and then didn't realize what they did, or he just got mixed up in the land. That's all the theories we have. What are your thoughts, Ty?
I have no idea. Maybe the aliens.
Really?
No, I don't know. I'm gonna go with my theory.
Okay.
The underwater currents in the river.
Okay.
I think it carried his body to a different place. I don't know how long the river is or where it leads to, but I think that is a very possible thing that could have happened. Another one is, the farmers. I think something could have happened there. I don't know if they necessarily thought he was trespassing at 3 a.m. I don't know what farmers out in the middle of their field at 3 a.m.
I know my dad's not.
No.
He's sleeping.
Yeah, exactly. Unless it's like crop season and, they're out working. Yeah.
But it's May. In May, they're usually not in the fields at 3.
It's also in Minnesota.
That's true.
We're in a completely different
You're right.
place.
You're right.
But
I think the one that makes most sense is the farm one. I think it's very possible that he could have gotten ran over by a farm equipment. They freaked out and buried the body because they didn't want to be found out. I think to me that one makes the most sense. I think it has to do something with the farmers though. Just because the fact that the farmers are being so weird about keeping their land and not letting others search it.
Yeah.
If you have nothing to hide, you're not scared to let people search your land.
It's true.
Especially 17 years later.
Yeah.
Why are you still covering yourself 17 years later?
But then another question is how did the dogs pick up his scent all the way to the river and then lose it?
Well, I told you that theory too. He could have fallen in the river.
I know.
Got out, climbed out, and passed out in someone's field.
With the river flowing that fast,
He probably would have been taken away.
Yeah, there's no way he's falling in, especially intoxicated, and getting out of the river.
But you also have the winds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe he really wasn't, and his scent just got thrown off from all the crazy winds.
That's true, too.
I don't know. The thing is, this is why this case to me just makes no sense. Like, there's not any theory that you're like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, no matter, like, which theory you look at, there's still questions, and you're still like, I don't know what
There's
happened.
no right answer. Nobody knows.
And there's still, no matter what, there's always that thing that you're like, I just don't know. Like, nothing makes complete 100%.
Yeah.
No matter how much you theorize. There's always a question of like, but how did this happen?
I don't know.
I don't either. All right, guys. That is all we have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. We're curious to hear what all of your thoughts are of what happened and which theory you think it is, or if you think it's something also completely different. As of today in 2025, Brandon Swanson is still missing, which is devastating. His parents have not gotten closure in all of these 17 years, which is so hard for them. They are still doing active searches and taking tips for him. So if you have tips, please call either the Lind Police Department or the Lyon County Sheriff's Office. All right, that's all we have for you today, though. Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again in the next episode. Have a good rest of your weekend. Don't forget, as me and Ty like to say,
Till death do us part.